All right, so welcome everyone to February's meeting of the Nichols Strategies Digital Accessibility Professional Learning Community. That's such a mouthful. We're talking today about teaching and training and teaching, how we can turn around and share what we know with some of the folks in our organization, in our department, or in our region, and some do's and don'ts for managing that kind of process. I'm really excited to have a special guest joining me today. Janaca Scherer is going to be co-presenting with me on this topic today because I know she has done a lot of training and teaching as well. So she's going to be part of today's presentation. And for those of you who I have not met yet, my name is Emily Popek. I'm Vice President for Strategic Communications with Nichols Strategies. We are a school PR firm that supports schools and school districts, and accessibility is my love language. So that's why I'm here talking to you about it today. We are talking about training and teaching, top tips and key strategies and pitfalls to avoid. And then after our little presentation today, we'll turn off the recording and move into our discussion. So you will be invited to share some of your tips, some of your do's and don'ts, and let us know what's on your training wish list. What tools or resources do you wish you had that would help support training in your region? So before we get started today, I'm going to do a little vibe check. And the only thing I can think about this time of year is the weather. So drop in the chat, please let me know, how is the weather out there where you are? I'm really hoping someone is a number 5 so that I can live vicariously through you. Because if we in upstate New York are still stuck here at a number 1, it has been cold and snowing for seemingly my entire lifetime and always will be. So if anyone out there is enjoying sunshine, like please tell us what it's like. Melanie, love to hear that. I love that for you. I miss the West Coast where sometimes it doesn't snow. Um, Michael is also enjoying some sunshine. Leslie, between 4 and 5, that's great. I would take it. I would take it. Anywhere above a 2 would be great for me right now. But thanks for sharing your vibe check. This time of year, again, all I can think about is the weather because it's February. So, and feel free to introduce yourself too as we move through this vibe check. Let us know who you are, what school district or organization you're with, and where you're joining us from. I mean, we've got some of your locations already. We're all jealous of those of you who are in California. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat as well as we get into today's session on teaching and training. So teaching and training about accessibility can be challenging in part because it's such a big topic and it's a very broad topic. And it can be tough to know where to jump in or where to dive in. So some key strategies that I would recommend for teaching or training about accessibility is to really start off by defining the specific goal or purpose that you want to achieve in that session. Even if you had all day, you probably couldn't cover everything about accessibility in just one training, right? So zeroing in on what that very specific thing is that you really want to achieve in the session in front of you, I think is a really important way to position yourself for success when you're teaching or training about accessibility. Because this topic is often unfamiliar to the people who are going through this training, I think it's also really important to find a way to start from some shared base of knowledge. Find a point of entry into this topic that's likely to be familiar to your audience in some way. We've talked about some examples of that in this group before. Like, for example, if you're speaking with anyone who has experience supporting students in special education programs or things like that, that can be a shared knowledge base that you can build on. If you can think of experiences that might be common that people may have had who are in the room with you, starting from there can really help people see their way into a topic that can otherwise feel very abstract. Oftentimes, the things we're talking about when we're teaching or training for accessibility are far removed from people's personal experiences. They might not have walked in the shoes of someone with disabilities, but they may have still experienced some things or have knowledge or awareness of some things that are relevant to this topic. So connecting it back to something that the people in your group can relate to or may have experienced is a really important way to, I think, find a point of entry into this topic. Again, because this topic can be very overwhelming or feel very broad, focusing in on really zeroing in on just a few top takeaways is, I think, another important strategy for success. So you've got that defined goal, you've got a clear purpose for your training that you could write on the whiteboard, right? Like you will leave this training with X. And then what are those top takeaways? What do you want people to be hearing in their mind or thinking over or be able to turn and tell someone else after your session? What are those one, two, or three top of mind things that you can hit over and over again in the training so it really stays with them? And finally, we know that it can be tough to get this topic prioritized in our organization if we want to get in front of people and talk about accessibility. So I think the most successful approaches that I've seen are when you're able to lean into existing opportunities for professional development, whatever those look like in your organization. Maybe there are conferences or PD days, right, where you have staff in the building, but there are no students. Those are usually planned out well in advance. But you never know until you ask if it's possible to get on the agenda with some really specific goal or purpose for a really specific audience. Maybe it's something you want teachers to hear. Maybe it's something you want office staff to hear. Is there any time in that day when you can get in front of people? I think it's also really powerful to leverage those mandatory staff trainings that our staff often have to complete at the beginning of a school year, right? If there is a way to introduce accessibility into that process, now you've put it in front of everybody's face every year. So that's a really powerful opportunity to put this topic in front of the employees in your organization. And then even more informal gatherings like faculty meetings can be an opportunity to get messages out to targeted groups of people within your organization, faculty or staff meetings, I should say, because this obviously isn't just confined to your teaching faculty. So these are a few kind of broad overarching strategies that I have seen be successful to get accessibility in front of people and present it in a way that makes it stick. So now I'm going to turn it over to Janaca for some more targeted tips of what to actually do once you're in front of people and have their attention.
Hi, everybody. So, in our training efforts, I've really focused in on interactive components. So, trying to demonstrate good and bad examples side by side. So, a really simple way to demonstrate this in my slides, I have a white background with some yellow text on top of it that has a really swirly font. And I just ask who can read it. And of course, everybody's like, well, I can struggle. And, I got to really squint and get up close. But then you switch to another side that has very high color contrast, right? And these are things that we can like visibly see and are a lot easier to understand for people who maybe aren't living in the digital mindset that we tend to on a very regular basis. I also like to incorporate real world examples that are going to be relevant to the work that individuals are doing. So this could be something, like if you're working with a group of secretaries who are sending out newsletters, we might hyper focus on the newsletter and even demonstrate maybe again the good versus the bad, taking an example of, this is why we don't just put a flyer into our newsletter and send it. This is why we're not just sending our s'more link with no other context, because we're not going to get searchability. It's going to be hard for families to translate, and kind of like focusing in on those individual pieces. We also like to blend stats with stories. For instance, I always share a little screenshot of our Google Analytics that show over half of our constituents are visiting our website via a mobile device of some sort. So I think that makes it a little bit more obvious. Staff members, a lot of time, right? Like I'm always doing my work on two monitors, nice big monitors. But in reality, in most cases, people are visiting on these tiny little devices. I also, we need to relate to people accessing content in their own lives as well. So again, going back to the sending the link through your newsletter link through email with no additional context or anything like that. I often pull up, I'm sitting in the dentist office. I want to look at my student's newsletter. Oh no, the dentist office doesn't have Wi-Fi. And now that it looks like I've read that email, I'm not going to go back to it. I don't have any of that content. And finally, I always like to check for understanding. I leave lots and lots and lots of time for questions, and I always hang out afterwards after a presentation as well, in case people don't want to, do the super public. I always honor that the work can feel very overwhelming. I have a little slide in my presentation that's, everybody taking a nice big breath, and I make sure everybody's breathing in. We kind of honor that feeling. I know that we've all have been there before. And then I also like to say too, the reason we're doing the work. Even if we make a difference for one student or one family member, the work is worth it, right? We approach with positive intent. This is something I get to do and not necessarily something I have to do, even though it is a legal requirement. And really honing in on we're trying to do things for our students and our families. And I think when you tie it back to that element, it makes it a lot easier for staff members to accept that there might need to be some change, and that we need to incorporate some new ideas and how we're sharing information. So, Emily, I'll kick it back to you.
Thanks. And I love what you just said. I should have had that on my slide too, that, the why is such an important part of this, that
Mhm.
we're not just doing this like because we're really mean and we want to make people's lives harder. Like there's a really, really important why behind all of this. So if I could go back in time to my previous slide, I would add that to these key strategies, right? Like e- explain the why behind all of this. And maybe that ladders back to the goal or purpose of the training because it's so important to frame it that way. So I'm glad you brought that forward. And I just wanted to say a little more about the feelings part of this because every time I have done an accessibility training or presentation, some version of these five people have been in the room with me. I know the stages of grief aren't real. Like I know this isn't like a really accurate model for the grief process, but I did find it relevant to talking about accessibility because in any given room of people, when we are talking about these expectations, which can feel very different from the status quo, which can feel very challenging to wrap our heads around, which can feel, at times overwhelming. Some version of these five reactions are probably going to be present. You'll have people who are in denial, who just simply put up a wall and are like, nope, like I'm not dealing with this. I don't really want to hear it. I can't think about it. They're feeling overwhelmed. They're having trouble taking in the information and they're a little bit tuned out. I have had people get outright angry with the things that I'm saying, like angry, angry, actually mad. I had a woman in tears once at the concept that we were like going to have to maybe take the honor roll and put it on the website, not as a PDF, but as a web page. And I'm not in any way mocking or making fun of that woman. It was really hard for her to deal with what I was asking her to do. And it was really upsetting. And she was really mad. I had a superintendent tell me out of frustration that he was just going to delete the website. We just weren't going to have a district website anymore if this was what I was going to ask him to do. Or he, like every conversation we would have around this topic was evasive. Well, maybe we could just get away with doing this. Well, maybe we can just slide by with that. It was a lot of bargaining and not really sort of wanting to face this issue head on. Um, I saw on Facebook a week or so ago, I gave a presentation on accessibility, and someone posted that coming to that session like made them question everything about their life. And I was like, oh no, I'm so sorry. It can feel really heavy. It can feel really heavy to think about the magnitude of work that might be ahead of us, and that can really bring people down. But often, hopefully, with support and work and like space and time and hand holding, we can get people to that point of acceptance. Um, where, if we can if we leave time and make space for some of these feelings that are going to come up and be present in these conversations, then we can hopefully reach that place of acceptance where people feel ready to actually take the first steps into this work. Now, I don't think everyone feels all these things when they start learning about accessibility. I think some people are into it, and that's awesome. But if you're doing a teaching or training or presentation on this topic, be prepared for these emotions to show up because I think that it's very common for people to feel some combination of these things when they start thinking, and you'll hear it in questions that are really more of a comment like, you mean you're asking me to do this? You mean we're going to have to do that? Those are some of the expressions of these feelings. And it can be challenging to honor these feelings when you may have already moved through all of them and you're ready to go, right? So we have to remember that part of our job as teachers and trainers is to help people, reach the stage of acceptance that we're at, and find their own way through whatever feelings come up for them when we're asking them to make what may be a really profound change to the way that they approach their work, which can be challenging for folks to contemplate. So this basically concludes our little presentation. I just want to share a few notes about our next couple sessions before we move into a discussion. Our next PLC in March is going to be office hours, so bring your questions, bring your problems, bring your hot tips and your hot takes and your solutions. The QR code on your screen will take you to registration for that session. And then looking ahead in April, we're going to talk about change management and road mapping. How do we manage change within our organization? How do we create a compliance roadmap? Some of the things to think about for that. And May 13th, we're going to do a little compliance check-in. We can all talk about where we're at and where we want to be. And then in June, we're going to do a little more looking ahead and talk about our wins, goals, and plans, just like we did last June. That was a great conversation last year. I loved hearing about what everyone was, hoping to achieve and celebrate some of our victories for the year. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation again. As a reminder, we are also running accessibility cohorts. The registration for the third cohort just opened up. So that's a more structured walkthrough of building your compliance roadmap as an organization. You can bring up to 5 colleagues with you into that cohort session. So we do still have spots available if you or anyone you know was interested in joining that cohort.